Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Transformation Tuesday. Today I'm talking about Nancy. So Nancy is a 63-year-old woman who came to see me for a constant cough, hoarseness in her voice, reflux, which was really huge for her, and constipation. So for those who don't know me, I am Ange Sinclair and I'm the digestive detective. So Nancy had a cold 6 months prior to coming to see me. And through this cold, she developed a constant cough. She'd been prescribed a steroid puffer from her doctor, which initially worked, which was fantastic, but it no longer did. And she was finding she would be waking up with in the night with coughing. So she had a hoarseness in her throat that completely changed her voice. And it was a very interesting change. You know, she was quite squeaky, but quite deep as well in her voice. So along with this, she had a postnasal drip. So she would be secreting mucus down the back of her throat all the time. So with her postnatal drip, it would cause her reflux as well. And one of the biggest side effects for that for Nancy was that she had this excess mucus production. So much the mucus production was, in fact, that she carried with her a little plastic sandwich bag, which she spat mucus into all day long. So you can imagine, as a 63-year-old woman, she was pretty horrified with this. She was mortified that she had to do it. But it was the only way that she could actually walk around and go out because this mucus production was so bad. So she also had chronic constipation as well, and her health history was quite involved. She'd had an underactive thyroid, and she also had some bone density issues. She was a teeny tiny little lady, so right in the target market for osteoporosis. So I want to sidetrack here for a minute though and talk about reflux. Research shows us that 28% of Australians have reflux regularly and 20% have it occasionally, so it's a really big problem. There are many natural solutions that don't have side effects that the proton pump inhibitors do. And I often get asked about the side effects from proton pump inhibitors. And they are things like B12 deficiency, iron deficiency, other nutrient depletions long-term, osteoporosis, stomach cancer, pancreatitis. Because it changes our gut microbiome, the PPIs change our gut microbiome, they damage the gut bacteria, but they also increase our risk of getting Clostridium difficile and pneumonia are also really, really big side effects. So in my opinion, I think it's really great that you try a natural alternative rather than being on the PPIs long term, because there is research coming out now that they really aren't that great for us. So let's talk about you for a minute. Does anybody here have reflux issues? You know, I have a question for you. Do you know what causes your reflux? And do you know what makes it feel better or worse? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear back. So let's get back to Nancy. So before I had seen Nancy, she had been to lots of doctors and had lots and lots of testing from doctors, ENT specialists, gastroenterologists, integrated doctors, and regular doctors. So her ENT had done an endoscope, and they'd found that her vocal cords were really red and inflamed. He didn't know what the reason for this was, but he thought it was due to the continued reflux that she was having. So when I started seeing Nancy, she was taking Fess, Pulmicort, Nexium, Tarzak, and Gaviston, and that was just for her reflux. Yet she still had really bad reflux. So she also took a barrel load of supplements, over-the-counter medicines, and prescribed medicines that she'd been given from all these doctors. So pretty much it was a hot mess. And none of it was really helping her. You know, she was still spitting into this little bag. She was still not being able to sleep properly because of her reflux. She was still not being able to talk in her normal voice. So with Nancy, she slept elevated on a wedge pillow, which helped her reflux enormously. But it didn't really help with the sleep because it was an uncomfortable position for her to be in. So her bowel movements were pretty erratic as well. And she often said that she felt like she wasn't having proper bowel movements. So talking, one of the things that for her that made her condition feel worse was talking to people, and laying down, she said, made her symptoms significantly worse. So she was overwhelmed with the amount of products that she was taking. And plus also with the mucus that she was spitting up into the little bag, it was really impacting her social life. And what was really worse, that she was really active in social groups, and now she felt if she talked too much, she would be much worse than she had been. So in our first consultation, we went through hi Robin, we went through all the supplements that she had and all the medications that she took, keeping ones that were only absolutely necessary, and we put the others on hold, and we thought we could work through some of those if we needed them. So basically we sent her away with a food, mood and poo journal. Her GP was fantastic, had already put her on a gluten-free diet, had tested her to see that she wasn't celiac, had put her on a gluten-free diet and told her to increase her vegetables. So that was really fantastic. I really love that already. So I suggested to her that she should see a dentist because it had been over a year and she had had previous problems with root canals. And I know a lot of people ask me, why do you send people to the dentist? Well, one of the reasons is the bacteria in your mouth can become overgrown, and it can become dysbiotic. So dysbiotic means that the bad bacteria outweigh the good bacteria. And we know there's so much research around that. We know that the bacteria in your mouth, if it is dysbiotic, can go on to cause you cardiac issues and gut problems, and even reflux is one of the potential side effects. So it's always good, if you haven't been to the dentist in the last 6 months, go. And it's always really beneficial to get your teeth and your mouth checked. Really good indicator of something happening in your gut if something's happening in your mouth. So that's one of the reasons I get people to do that. So one of the supplements I prescribed for Nancy was N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, or NAC for short, depends who you talk to. So it has fantastic research around it for being a mucolytic, which means it breaks down mucus. And for Nancy, that was a big thing because she was literally carrying a little bag around spitting mucus into it. I also gave her a bottle of herbs specifically for her postnasal drip, her excess mucus production, reflux, and also protection of her mucous membranes because they were all obviously inflamed and we wanted to try and reduce that. I made her come back in 2 weeks, which is really good, and I don't normally do that, but because she was so bad and it was impacting her life so badly, I thought we needed to do that. So in 2 weeks she came back with her food, mood and poo diary, and I could pinpoint straight away why she was constipated. Even though her doctor had asked her to increase her vegetable content, she was still only eating about 10 grams of fibre a day. So we all know this is not enough to have healthy bowel movements. For women, we are supposed to be eating about 28 grams a day of fibre, and for men about 34 grams a day. That's a lot of fibre. When you see a picture of that, it's an amazing amount of fruit and vegetables and fibre. So if you're not eating around that mark, try and get up to it because it really does improve your bowel movements, which will improve your gut microbiome, which will improve your hormones, your liver output, your mental health, your mood, your sleep, a whole stack of things. So get onto that. Nancy hated eating fruit, so we agreed rather than her having to eat the pieces of fruit that she would make a smoothie every day with her fruit, her flax seeds, which are really great for constipation, by the way, and a protein powder so she could get in her daily recommended allowance. She also ate the same foods over and over again. So that's not a great thing for producing a really robust microbiome. So different foods feed different bacteria, so it's perfect for her to be able to every day to change the fruit that she was putting in, and some days we got her to put in veg, which was a bit of a struggle. So the herbs and the NAC, when she came back, had reduced her mucus a little bit. So I gave her another bottle of herbs with the same herbs, interestingly enough, but I changed the ratio of each herb on the symptoms that she described to me. And then I saw it in 2 weeks later, and the fantastic thing is her cough had changed. It had become very, very light. Now, remember, she'd had this cough for 6 months, so I was a little bit surprised by this, considering that there was no herb specifically for a cough in the mix. So the amount of mucus she was spitting up was significantly reduced. So Nancy had abandoned her plastic bag, which was terrific and great for her self-confidence and her self-esteem. And she was able to manage the amount of mucus now with tissues. So you can imagine how happy she was around this. It really had given her life back. So what happened next was Nancy had to have a colonoscopy and an endoscopy that was scheduled between our last visit and our next one. And her ENT said her vocal cords were much less inflamed and red. They were still a little bit red. She was found to have a polyp on colonoscopy and they removed that. So what happened after this was a bit disappointing. After these procedures, and it happens often, her postnasal drip came back, and so did her excess mucus, and so did the issues with the bowel, which is not really that uncommon. So I would say to you, this happens because we're making a disruption in a microbiome. If anybody's had a colonoscopy, the Pico Prep is pretty much wipes out the gut bacteria that we just spent all that time getting right. So that was a bit frustrating. What we did was more herbs, and I changed the herbs up a lot more this time, and I made them specifically targeted to the symptoms that she was exhibiting today because they had changed a little bit to when she'd first come. I used a fibre supplement to help her re-establish her bowel function because she'd had so much trouble with that bowel function. We thought that a fibre supplement would help her re-establish it quickly. So as she was leaving, she tells me that the specialist said to her that she had hiatus hernia. So a hiatus hernia is where your diaphragm is actually moving up into your cavity. It makes a little hole and it moves up. It shouldn't be there. It will give you reflux. One of the things, lots of people who have hiatus hernia have reflux. And it's funny that people always tell me just before they leave. We were literally standing at the door saying our goodbyes, and she told me she'd had a hiatus hernia. So I said, come back in for a minute. I got her to put into her morning practice heel drops, where basically you fill your belly up with a glass of water when it's empty, and you just drop up and down on your heels about 20 times, and you do 2 sets of those. And what that does is it pulls the hiatus hernia from up in your chest back down into your diaphragm where it's supposed to be, or into your stomach where it's supposed to be. And this helps alleviate reflux symptoms. And I've actually seen somebody do this where it's actually closed the little hole over and they've not had hiatus hernia anymore, which is fantastic. After that, I saw her a month later, and her voice had completely changed again, which was amazing. She said it was almost back to her normal voice. So she didn't sound like who she did at the outset. Her mucus had completely disappeared. The reflux that she had was sporadic. So instead of daily getting it, she would be now getting it once or so per week, and she had pinpointed the reasons that she would get it. And some of the reasons were when she was standing, shoveling foods in her mouth when she was in a rush, and these are her words, not mine, always guaranteed her that she would get heartburn. And anybody who's followed me for a while knows that you have to get into rest and digest, and you have to sit in rest and digest so you don't get that reflux guaranteed after you've stuffed food in and run, because your body's in fight or flight, and when you're in fight or flight you don't digest food. The food sits there, you get a bigger uprising of bacteria, which in turn can cause your reflux. Basically her constipation was pretty much resolved. She didn't notice that she did notice that if she didn't have her smoothie, there would be issues straight away. So and that to me just says that her body needs that constant fiber, which we all do. For me, this entire case gets back to Nancy's gut. She was not getting enough fiber, which was likely causing her the dysbiosis in her gut. And I see this over and over, that people who are not eating enough fiber, and it's usually carbs, people go, oh, I don't like carbs, they make me fat, do all this sort of stuff, and they cause reflux for people. But also people who overconsume carbs will also get reflux, and because what happens for them is that they tend to sit, especially if they have some digestive issues around that, or bowel issues around that, and it causes that bacteria to overconsume, and then that sends acid back up the throat. So one of the things I can say to you about Nancy, she was a pretty dedicated patient. You know, as you can see by her total improvement within a 6-month time frame, she was so committed, and that's sometimes what it takes to get these results. She will still have to continue to monitor her fibre intake, and I think that will be a lifelong thing for her because she does struggle with vegetables and fruit. So thanks for listening for me today. If you have reflux issues or any other health conditions we talked about for Nancy, head over to my website and book in for a free 15-minute consult to see if any of these strategies will work for you. Please don't go into the new year or the new decade with these things hanging over your head. You want to live the life you want to be able to, and reflux and constipation all hold you back from doing what you want to do. So have a fabulous week, everybody, and I'll see you next Tuesday for Transformation Tuesday. Look forward to it. Bye.